Sue, if you would, please call the roll.
Mr. Agnesi,
Present.
Mr. Allen,
Present.
Mr. Anderson is excused. Mr. Hirsch,
Here.
Mr. Collegian,
Present.
Mr. Macchio is excused. Mr. Mortimer,
Present.
Mr. Sadi,
Present.
Mr. Zaharidis. Okay. And Chairman Quish.
I'm here as well. So we have 7. That is a quorum. First order of business under new business is 13 Summer Place, petition of Robert Andrade for a coastal site plan review to construct a single-family dwelling on map 29, block 558, parcel 558, of which Robert Andrade is the owner. Applicant has the floor. If you would, state your name and address for the record.
Robert Andrade, 36 Randolph Farm Road.
If you would just tell us a bit about your project and just sort of fill us in on what's going on.
We'd like to build a one-family, 3-story house on the property. Probably 35 and a half feet or 34 and a half feet tall.
Okay, great. Brian, do you have an administrative review for us? And I think you need to put your mic on, please, if you would, Brian.
The administrative review is that it applies, all the zoning regulations are applied to, and we recommend that there was one outstanding issue that about the soil testing, and it's on the proposed motion that's before you. But other than that, everything's okay.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
Mr. Quish, I make a motion regarding 13 Summer Place to approve as presented the petition of Robert Andrade for a coastal site plan review to construct a single-family dwelling on map 29, block 558, parcel 558, of which Robert Andrade is the owner. And excuse me, I meant to move to present with the following conditions, and that is that the applicant comply with the city engineer's review of July 25th, 2024, item A, which is the soil testing.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sue, if you would, please call the roll.
Mr. Agnesi,
With the motion.
Mr. Allen,
With the motion?
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Quish.
I'm with the motion. Good luck with your project, sir.
Thank you.
Next order of business is 152 Beach Avenue, Zone BD1, petition of Codispoti and Associates PC for a coastal site plan review to construct a two-family dwelling on map 60, block 740, parcel 1, of which 152 Beach Ave LLC is the owner. Applicant has the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Kersaden. My office is at 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. With me this evening is also the applicant, Sachan Anand, and Jeff Gordon from Codispoti and Associates and Bob Wee are here to answer questions. It's a fairly straightforward project. This is the Woodmont, former Woodmont Downtown District. It's a BD1, so you're allowed to have 2 units as of right per lot, and we're proposing on the corner of Beach Avenue and Kings Highway, it's 2 lots, and we are proposing 2 units on each one of those lots. The structures are actually separated. They're not connected. It's not a 4 unit building. We've probably for about 7 or 9 months have been in review with David Sulkus and staff. We've had city engineering look at it, fire department, Mr. Miller and I have talked about it once or twice. And so, I mean, pending your questions, the intention is to build two-family houses, essentially. Or duplexes, whatever the phrase would be.
Great. Did you, any questions or comments from the board at this time? Yep, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Crusaden, it appears that the 152 Beach and 162 Kings Highway is the same project, or are they two different projects?
They're two separate addresses and two separate lots, but it's going to be built simultaneously as one project, and
Okay.
yeah.
And just because I know I've never seen this, explain the two buildings, two lots, but they're joined walls.
In this particular case, we're not adjoining the walls. We originally had planned to, but we had to, Mr. Sulkus interpreted that as a multi-family use, which would not be allowed as of right. We really looked at it as a building code, building department issue. He disagreed, and so we ended up separating the structures, so they're not connected. They're on two separate lots.
Okay, but each building is going to have how many units?
Two.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
they're not side by side, they're stacked.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. You're welcome.
Mr. Hirsch.
Attorney Crusaden, good evening.
Good evening.
When I was reviewing the materials, it indicates a proposed two-unit elevated building.
Yes, correct.
Can you explain what you mean by two-unit elevated building?
So there's two units in each structure. So there's two units at 152 Beach and two units at 162 Kings Highway. It's elevated because it is in the flood zone, which is also one of the reasons it's in front of you, because it's in a coastal area management zone. So it's elevated to meet the FEMA flood code and building code regulations. That's it. Thank you.
So a question, is there a curb cut on each of the two roads, one on Beach Avenue for 152 Beach and one on Kings Highway for 162?
I know, I'd have to check and see what the current plan is. I think that we had gotten some comments from the city engineer on that. So there's one proposed on Beach Avenue right now. There's parking underneath the structures.
Right, so will need to be some kind of an easement?
Correct.
And that will be...
Absolutely. Yeah, we had talked about, we'll put the easements in place if we receive the necessary approvals, but they'll have to be, because it may always be the same owner, but it might not be, so we'll have to give cross easements for parking and access, correct?
And so your application includes that as part of what you're asking us to approve?
Correct.
Is that there is going to be one curb cut for both buildings, and there'll be an easement, however, that needs to be worked out by
That's
legal?
correct, and the city engineer raised that as an issue as well, and we're in agreement with that.
Understood. Okay. Any further questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Again, good evening, Attorney Crusaden. The materials that we have tonight that appear to be the plans that were filed August 9th of 24 show combined buildings. Have you submitted any additional plans? Because all we have to go on if we approve your request is going to be the co-joined buildings.
I think that, I'm not sure which materials you have in front of you, but I know that the last set of plans were essentially the same structures, but they were separated, and there was a column that was moved underneath the structure in order to accommodate that separation. So we're not asking you to approve structures that are connected, because I think that would trigger a special permit or a special exception application.
And I guess that probably, Mr. Chair, through you to Brian, if you could explain, we're seeing a July 9th map that shows conjoined structures. Was there something that came in afterwards?
I guess one question is, Kevin, when you said that they're not attached buildings, and forgive me, because a lot of the work was done before I got here, they're shown flat on the property line. So what does that mean? Is there two walls that are right
Yes.
next to each other?
That's correct.
And so there's nothing common between both of them? The roof?
Correct.
Uh,
There's nothing common between them, and so in this zone, there's 0 side yard setback required. So we had to have the architect, the architect's not here this evening, redraft the plans to address the concerns. So there was nothing from either building that was connected. We couldn't even have the decks connected or anything like that. It had to be 2 entirely separate structures.
What
So that-
happens if only one is built? What does it look like? And then the other one wants to be built?
I'd have to ask the developer to answer that question, but they were designed to be standalone. They don't need each other in order to be constructed.
I think if one is built and the other isn't built, how does that work? And then the other's built later.
Well, it would work like any other building because they're standalone structures. They're proposed to be standalone structures.
So if there, forgive, ma'am,
No,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
trying to, because so if, let's say, there's siding on it, right? And they come in and put the house right next to it, is it going to be next to the siding, right up against the siding, or does the siding have to come off?
It has to be on the 2 separate lots. So whether one building cannot go over the property line. So if there's 2 sets of siding or the siding's removed from one, I mean, it's kind of like a in the field building, construction question, but the 2 walls would be abutting against each other.
They'd be right next to each other?
Yes.
There'd be no space between them?
They're not, I don't know whether,
I'm sorry.
that's okay, no problem. I don't know whether they would be a very, 1-inch gap. We've had a similar one like this. It was on Marceline Lane where there was adjoining buildings. They were built as one project, but for the same reason, the builder had left a 1-inch gap in between the structures, and the roofs were not connected. So I don't know whether there would be a small gap or whether they would actually be butting up against each other.
The engineer was concerned that some of the services to the units were shared. That's why he wanted the easements so that there could be a share of the water, the sewer, the electricity. So if you don't include that, then there's going to be separate lines coming in.
Right.
And there won't be any lines that could cross another property.
Yes. Yeah. I think that Mr. Gordon is pointing out that after we had received the city engineer's comments yesterday, or it might even been prior to that, each property has its own utilities going to it because they're both on street fronts. So it is separate utilities.
So I have a question, Brian. Again, following through on Brian's question is that if you don't side, okay, you have 2 buildings and they're close to each other. They would either be 4 or 5 feet apart enough so you could finish the wall, put the siding up, trim it, put gutters or whatever you would need to do. Either that's the case or they are touching, right? So there can't be an unfinished side with a 1/4-inch gap. So let me just finish. So the roofs would be connected, it seems, or it seems to me that we don't have full information on what you're actually going to build. That's what I'm hearing right now.
I'll have the owner and developer try to answer some of those questions if you can. But we had gone through of all this through the process with David Sulkus. I'm not a builder, but my understanding is that in other projects in town, there have been duplexes built like this with gaps in between on the property line. Whether this one's going to abut,
Yeah, that'd be good to hear about it. You know,
to see how it works,
it's
but
obviously,
we've provided.
we don't have the information right yet, so that's really great to get it. If you would just state your name and address for the record, please.
Sachin Anand, 9 Little Pond Road, Milford, Connecticut. Good evening, everyone. If I can.
Yeah, so I guess the question Brian had and the question that I followed up with is it one building or is it two buildings? And if it's two buildings, what is the separation between the two buildings? And then, like, you know, how much distance between them? Is it an inch? Is it 4 feet? What is it? And how would you complete two separate buildings if there wasn't enough room for a worker to get in there to put in siding, for example, or finishing?
So I'll try to get as less technical as I can be. First of all, to answer the first question, these buildings, this project will be fully built at the same time. That's what our proposed project is, and both buildings will be built at the same time. Just to have a comment from him saying that, what if the one building is not built, another building? No, that's not the plan. I'm the sole developer on it, so I'm going to build the entire project at the same time, which we always do. And I think we have proven that multiple times in different projects I've done in Milford so far. And other than that, to give you specific material stuff, and I think architectural plan has been modified in many ways based on Mr. Sulkus' reviews and building department review to how this building needs to be separated. There's multiple ways you can build there's no such thing as saying you need to put a siding on the side. I can build the wall, I can build a structure wall on the ground with everything finished on one side, and I can stand it up. So there's no need for any worker to be in between the units. So that's saying anything can be built the way it depends on what we're proposing right now. So there is a gap between two buildings that's not attached. We know that because of various zoning, city planner, and other building code to comply with that. And this we have done it in previous projects, too, not in Milford, any other place. We are very much capable of building a whole wall on the ground, finish it, and stand it up. No workers needs to go on the other side, and they will completely separate. So that's a construction aspect of the building.
Thank you. Any questions for the board? Yep, John.
So how do you handle the runoff of the roofs? You must have gutters, separate gutters for each building, correct?
Exactly.
So the space between the two houses has to be at least the width of the two gutters plus something so they don't touch, correct?
It could be. No, I think I'm going to have, he engineered it, so I'm going to have him answer that question for you.
Good evening, Jeff Gordon from Codispoti and Associates, 263 Boston Post Road. This is like any kind of a townhouse development where you have units abutting units abutting units. Merwin Avenue, we have a whole PDD where you have individual townhouses on fee simple lots. What happens is the drainage comes front to back, not side to side. So there is no need to drain between the buildings. The buildings will abut one another. Drainage will go to the sides.
Sorry. So the pitch of the roof they don't go
That
towards
way,
each
not,
other.
Not that way. Yes,
There's
correct.
not one roof.
They are flat roofs, but they don't go to the common line. They go to the uncommon line.
Okay. One other question. So how far are these two houses separated?
They're abutting. They really pretty much touching one another. It's a zero lot line regulation. It was a zone that was designed for townhomes.
So they're touching, but it's not the same wall.
Right. You can build a wall here, and then you can build another wall, and then you can tilt them up so they sandwich together.
Okay. And then on the plans we have, it seems they share a front deck.
Right, but the ownership splits.
And then why then would you not come before us with a proposed merger of the lots in a 4-unit building?
Well, actually, it was a separation of lots that took place because in the BD1, you're allowed to have 2 units per lot. So you have 2 lots that conform. Each one has a 2-family home, but with the 0 lot line, the common line is where the 2 buildings join up together. And then you have the setbacks on the street side and then the other side of the building.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, I would, Brian, do you have anything else you'd like to contribute?
No, but I think that the assumption of the city engineer was that there would be some crossings of the, some mutual use. And I think that that probably could be remedied by ensuring that there be 2 separate services to each for one of the houses. And I think if it's if that's the way it works, then I believe that the city engineer's comments will have been addressed.
Right, so that would then be 2 electrical services, 2 sewer hookups, 2 separate water.
2 separate cables, 2 separate everything.
Okay, is that, you think that's your intention?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions, I'd hear a motion.
Okay, well, this is the 152 Beach Ave. We're doing them separate?
Yeah, I think it's cleaner that way.
Okay, I move to approve with the following conditions. Petition of Codespotty and Associates, PC, for a coastal site plan review to construct a 2-family dwelling on map 60, block 740, parcel 1, of which 152 Beach Avenue LLC is the owner. Applicant to comply with city engineer review of August 19th, 2024, items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, please call the roll, sir.
Mr. Agnesi,
With the motion.
Mr. Allen,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
I'm against the motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Chairman Quish.
I am with the motion. The motion passes. We have, I believe we have heard the applicant's petition for 162 Kings Highway. Was there anything else you'd like to add to that? So we'll dispense with everything except the motion at this point.
All right, I move to approve with the following conditions. Petition of Codespotty and Associates, PC, for a coastal site plan review to construct a 2-family dwelling on map 60, block 740, parcel 1A, of which 152 Beach Avenue LLC is the owner. Applicant to comply with city engineer review of August 19th, 2024, items A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, John.
I just want to say, I have nothing against the 2. If these are zoning compliant, you know, it's fine. It just seems to be like an end run around the regulations, and so that's, just want to get it on the record. That's why my vote was no.
Understood.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. No discussion on the motion. If we could call the roll.
Mr. Agnesi,
With the motion.
Mr. Allen,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
Against the motion.
Mr. Savvy,
With the motion.
Chairman Quish.
I'm with the motion. Both motions pass. Next order of business is 34 Pearl Street, Zone R5 petition. Oh, I'm sorry, that has been postponed. And then 76 Shelland has also been postponed. So the next order of business is a public hearing, 17-19 Cherry Street, Zone RO petition of Andrea Gomes Esquire for site plan review to construct an 8-unit residential development under State Statute 830G on map 65, block 81, parcel 11, of which Cherry Pie LLC is the owner. This has been continued from the 16th of July. We do need to close the public hearing tonight unless the applicant wishes to extend our time. We do not need to vote on it tonight. We have a vote date of September 25th. At this point, the applicant has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Mr. Chairman, board members, for the record, my name is Andrea Gomes. I'm an attorney at Hinckley Allen at 20 Church Street in Hartford, here tonight on behalf of the applicant. With me tonight are Jeff Gordon and Robert Wee-Way of Codispoti, our consulting landscape architect and civil engineer. We have Sam Gardner from Greg Weiss and Gardner Architects, our consulting architect. Stephen Ullman, our consulting traffic engineer from Benesh. And then we also have tonight Levin Vestergaard from The Lift Guys, which is a family-owned second-generation auto lift business, actually right here in Milford. And he has a lot of experience with auto stackers specifically. So he'll be talking to the board a bit about the auto stackers and here to answer questions. A few procedural housekeeping matters, Mr. Chairman. I believe Mr. Miller is trying to pull up our PowerPoint presentation. No, not to put him on the spot.
Apparently, the user was tied to the former operator of the internet, and by going out on the Wi-Fi, I cannot use it on my computer. But I can, I believe, I don't have the internet, but I think I can pop up your display. I apologize for the delay and the confusion. I did get here early, but I couldn't get in here, so.
And Mr. Chairman, just for the record, the board has copies of our PowerPoint, so we can get started while Mr. Miller's trying to get things going up on the screen. And everything that is in this PowerPoint is already in the materials the board received, so there's nothing really new here. So I'll just dive in while we're trying to get that up on the screen. The board should have, since the July 16th hearing, should have 2 new items from the applicant. We have a tabbed package, our supplemental materials from July 30th, and then separately, I believe it was received by the city on August 1st. We have turning movement plans for Mr. Ullman. We'll be going through those tonight. It goes without saying the tabbed package really just lists and provides additional information and answers to questions that the board posed at the July meeting. We'll be running through those tonight, really just focusing on the new information. But again, the rest of the team is here. Presentation will be myself, Mr. Ullman, and then Mr. Vestergaard will be getting up to talk about the auto stackers. But again, we're all here to answer any questions. A couple more housekeeping matters. We're in receipt of a new review memo from Mr. Miller, and of course he can speak for himself, but essentially the memo focuses on parking, including the auto stackers and snow storage. We'll be touching on these tonight, but the board will see that there really are no concerns here with any of those issues. And then lastly, before we get into really the substance here, just to provide the board with an update on our conversations with Sergeant Craniac on behalf of the Police Commission. As the board will recall, we received a memorandum, a review of the application from the Police Commission. And essentially what Sergeant Craniac or the Police Commission opined was that it needed more information on the number of units and the number of parking spaces. And it also needed more information on the auto stacker units. Everything that the board has received since the July meeting, we've submitted to Sergeant Craniac. Mr. Ullman has been in contact with Sergeant Craniac, giving him some of that additional information. The Police Commission will not be meeting again until September, so there isn't an opportunity for them to have commented there was not an opportunity for them to have commented for tonight's meeting, but again, we'll just remind the board that it's an advisory report, and really there were no safety concerns. It was just a request for additional information, which Sergeant Kraniak has. We will continue to have a discussion with Sergeant Kraniak, including Mr. Ullman can talk about this if the board has questions. He spoke with Mr. Ullman today and asked for information or a couple questions on auto stacker specifically. So we're going to be happy to put him into contact with Mr. Vestergaard. I can participate on that call to ensure that Sergeant Kraniak and the rest of the commission has enough information before it. So with that, I will dive in. I'll ask the commission to just turn to essentially slide 2 in its hard copy of the PowerPoint, since we're still trying to get that up on the screen. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about the auto stackers. I'm just running through some of the information we provided in response to questions, and Levin will expand on these. But the commission had asked about the specific model that we'll be providing. It's called the 6,000-pound capacity parking lift wide galvanized steel model on site. That's significant here because of the galvanized steel, so it's able to safely withstand harsher weather conditions. It's waterproof, weatherproof, and rustproof. And again, all this information is at tab 2 of our July 30th submission. The auto stackers will be operated with a keyed console that will have a push button and an emergency stop. You can see a photo, just an example of what type of console it is. Slide 2, upper left-hand corner. The auto stackers will be hardwired to a master power unit. I'm not sure if it was, but Mr. Chairman, that may have been your question about the power to it. And again, we just have some images here from the auto stacker brochure that on the right-hand side of slide 2. Lowered to rise in less than 1 minute. The commission had also asked about installing a fence or other barrier in front of the auto stackers. We took a look at that, and Mr. Ullman will touch on it, but essentially, respectfully, we don't think that's a good idea. That's just going to impact the site circulation and entering and exiting these spots. Regarding just general operations of the auto stacker, all residents, as we previously informed the board, will be receiving copies of the manual and will receive training on how to operate the auto stacker. There was a question from one of the board members about what if one of these auto stackers leaks? What will happen to that fluid? Again, this goes not only for the auto stacker, but any leaks that you get from your car, right? Everyone has had oil leak from their car. To the extent that happens with the auto stacker, which would be rare, and we can certainly ask Mr. Vestergaard to opine on that, any leaks on site would be the same. It would run into the stormwater management system, which will trap the fluid or any debris in the hydrodynamic separator, preventing off-site impact. So again, rare occurrence, but in the case it does happen, our stormwater management system has been designed to address that. A property manager will be available to the residents 24/7, not living on site, but available a short phone call away to assist with any issues, whether it be with the auto stackers. And in addition, at Mr. Vestergaard's suggestion, we're going to be including the number for the local installation technician for the auto stacker right on the lifts themselves, so that if a question arises and for whatever reason a property manager isn't responding quickly enough or whatever it may be, the residents have that opportunity to call an installation lift technician, and they're on call at all times to address any issues with the auto stackers themselves. Moving on, there was a question about the use of the shared driveway. And we're still on slide 2, although I'm not using any more slides for the rest of this introductory portion. But we addressed the use of the driveway, or what's called the Pentway, in our July 11th submission. The board has a detailed memo on really the legal bases for our use of that accessway at tab 2. In our July 30th submission, we reiterated the takeaways from that legal review, and essentially the highlights are that we confirmed that in looking at the title for the property, the shared access, or what was called the Pentway, has existed since at least 1986, long before the applicant or the neighbor owned their properties. And I say 1986 because that's how far we went back in the deeds, could have existed earlier. The applicant has an absolute right to access its property via the shared driveway, and the proposed use does not overburden the easement when we're only adding 6 dwelling units. And there's additional case law on that in the memorandum from July 11th. In addition, just practically speaking, I'd like to point out for the board, and I know that the neighbor was here speaking at the last hearing, both the applicant and the neighbor jointly benefit from the use of this joint access. It certainly improves access to the rear of our site, but it also improves access to the rear of the neighbor's site. So keep that in mind. It's a joint benefit for both of us, not just the applicant. Commissioner Hirsch, or Board Member Hirsch, excuse me, you requested additional information on the challenges to the historic ordinances here in Milford. We provided that in the July 30th submission. Really, there were 2 challenges that we're aware of, at least. The owner of 67 Prospect Street appealed the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of a request for a certificate of appropriateness by challenging the denial as illegal, but also by challenging the validity of the ordinances. Ultimately, that matter was settled in October 2020, but before that settlement, and Board Member, that this goes to your interest in the issue, the owner did file a motion for summary judgment, which we included in our package at tab 3, and I only highlight that because the motion for summary judgment highlights the legal bases for the challenge to the ordinance. The second challenge that we're aware of was the owner of 801 Boston Post Road and 3-5 Orange Avenue challenged the ordinances by submitting a letter directly to the Historic Preservation Commission, essentially opting out of the process. A copy of that letter is at tab 4 of our July 30th submission. On July 9th, the Historic Preservation Commission approved that owner's, what I'm calling the opt-out claim. Unfortunately, the minutes for that meeting were not available. I checked earlier today, they're not available online, so, and I wasn't at that meeting, so I can't provide the board any additional information, but we do know that there was an approval there. Again, this is all for the board's edification because Board Member Hirsch was interested, but respectfully, we submit that it's not relevant to the board's determination here. That's a separate and distinct issue from the board's review under 830G. Now, there were a bunch of miscellaneous questions as well, so I'm going to run through them quickly. There was a question about parking, not only from the board, but from Mr. Miller in his supplemental memo. And I'll note generally, I say this every time there's a question about parking, no one has more interest in ensuring that a development is properly parked than the owner. Because if there's not enough parking, there's issues with the residents, and it comes back on the owner, and that's not something that any developer or owner wants to face. With that in mind, we'll also note that it's relevant here, and it's particularly important that this site is located within less than half of a mile, frankly probably closer to a third of a mile from the Milford train station and 2 public bus stops right on Cherry Street to the east of the site. We also have a bike rack on site, and that's relevant here because we believe that the residents here are going to take advantage of that public transportation. They're going to be using the train station, walking, taking bikes, and that's relevant when you're looking at parking. Mr. Miller did note in his memo, did opine in his memo that no street parking is allowed, but actually we had a conversation with Sergeant Craniac, and by we, I mean Mr. Ullman, had a conversation with Sergeant Craniac where he confirmed that street parking is available on Cherry Street on the south side of that street near us. And in fact, when I was looking at the Google Street View, just to be able to really hone in, there are certainly no parking signs, and that's how Sergeant Craniac was able to confirm for us that street parking is on site. So to the extent there are visitors who need to visit the site and there isn't available parking on site, they can park on street, they can access the site via bus, train, bike, etc. But it is also relevant to note that General Statutes 8.2 provides that zoning regulations, as I'm sure the board knows by now, can't require more than one space per studio or one bedroom unit or 2 spaces for units with 2 or more beds. I understand that Milford has opted out of that provision, but it's still relevant because the state set a standard finding that that was adequate for multifamily development, and that certainly is relevant here. Mr. Miller noted in his report that there is a valid basis for that standard, for those numbers, particularly where there is street parking like we have here. The board had asked how trash collection was going to work. As the board remembers, there's a corral with several trash bins. Essentially, we're going to have the contractor pull into the site, walk over to the corral, wheel the bins to the trash vehicle, wheel them back when the contractor is done. It's important for the board to know that this contractor will be private. It's not the ginormous trash trucks that you see driving around the city on the day-to-day. So typically these private contractors use smaller trucks because they're making less stops. And lastly, there was a question about snow management. There is a storage area on the southwest corner of the site. The board will see that on the landscape plan. If the snow can't be stored in that area, it will be removed by a third-party contractor. And that takes me to our proposed approval conditions. The board has that at, I believe, tab 1, our tab 1 memo of our July 30th submission. We took the requests and the suggestions of the board from the July meeting and just put them into writing for ease of reference. There were 4 suggested approval conditions. One is, and we discussed this I think at the beginning of the last hearing, about the need to obtain Historic Preservation Commission approval prior to the issuance of a building permit, but we've put in that line if such approval is deemed to be legally necessary and appropriate, because again, there's going to be this challenge, or there already has been this challenge to the applicability of those ordinances to our site. The next approval condition is the applicant will take reasonable steps to preserve the existing red maple on site. We discussed that at the last hearing. As I just spoke about snow management, we're going to ensure that all snow removed from the site is stored within the snow storage area on the approved plan, and if it cannot be, then it will be removed off-site. So that will provide the board with some additional assurance that snow will be properly managed and will not impact parking on site at all. And then last but not least, this goes to auto stackers. Again, you'll hear a little bit more about this from Mr. Vestergaard. We will submit prior to the issuance of a CO an operations and maintenance plan regarding the auto stacker vehicle lifts. So that will provide for yearly inspections and other parameters, clearing snow and things like that, that the board can turn to if, again, very unlikely, we don't believe there will be issues, but at least the board will have something in writing reassuring that these will be properly maintained. So I ran through a lot very quickly, trying to be efficient. Certainly we're here for questions. I'm going to ask Mr. Ullman to step up quickly to talk about the vehicle turning plans, and then Mr. Vestergaard will step up after him.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Ullman. I'm a professional engineer with Alfred Benicia Company in Glastonbury, Connecticut. I performed the traffic information for you, and I did the auto turn diagrams that were presented to you. I essentially did 8 different auto turn movements. I did an entry and exit for what I call space 1. That's the space closest to the building. I did an entry and exit leaving for space 2. That's the one right next to it. Then I did the same thing for the last 2 locations, 7 and 8. For parking space number 1, in order to stay within the Pentway, the vehicle must pull in and back into that space. That's the only space where that is required to make it safely. One caveat, or let you know what I did with these auto turn movements, I did not do any corrections for people. Someone goes to pull into the space, pulls in short, backs up, and then corrects himself. I didn't. I did all of these with one smooth move into the space and exiting the space. And there are the 8 different diagrams you can see. All of them are able to be made within the Pentway and without encroaching in other parking spaces. The other thing I would note to the commission is, based on my history with AutoTurn, the software program, it tends to be very conservative. I have seen tractor trailers make movements that AutoTurn tells me cannot be made. So it all depends on the driver. But I was able to do all the spaces. If I can do space 1 and 2 and 7 and 8, spaces 3, 4, 5, and 6 can be done, just based on the geometry. And these are passenger vehicles. The standard AASHTO passenger vehicle is what I use for the analysis.
One question. When you said that in order to stay within the Pentway, what did you use for a size of the Pentway?
I basically took an extension between the 2 curb lines of the parking areas.
And how many feet is that?
I don't have it dimensioned on here.
Can I weigh in on that, Mr. Chairman? Again, for the record, Andre Gomes, counsel for the applicant. So I believe, I'm going to look to Mr. Gordon, I believe we had 15 feet for the Pentway width on the plan. 7.5 on one side, 7.5 on the other, so 15 total. We went through this in that memo I mentioned, going back about the applicant's right to use the Pentway. There is no defined width of the Pentway. So when there is no defined width of an easement, you look at the physical layout of the easement or the access way, and then you also look at the historic use. And when you looked, there was in that memo an aerial going back a number of years. You could see that it was basically that entire area. So we looked at that spacing in between the 2 buildings, which was about 15 feet, and we presumed, again, based on history and use and what we were seeing in title, that it was about 15 feet. But there is nothing explicitly saying what it is. You're really just looking at what the historic use of the property is.
Thank you for that. So is that, obviously you had to do some calculations. If you made a determination that you would have to back in to space number 1, did you use 7.5 feet on each side of that property line?
The distance for space 1 and the corner radii there, I could not get it to pull in even if I was against the other building. It just won't make the curve around with that 3 to 4 foot radius. So space 1 needs to do the back end. The other spaces you can pull in and use all the pavement that I defined that, as Attorney Gomes said, was between building to building. They could make the moves.
And then one more thing, Mr. Chairman. If the board looks at the site plan, which I actually included screenshots of the plans in the PowerPoints to avoid you having to flip around back and forth. So slide 8, it's difficult to see at that scale, but the board will see, and Mr. Gordon can give you more specifics about that. We have the current existing asphalt drive is going to be expanded a bit onto our property. So that's right, Jeff, right? He's pulling up the plan so we can actually see. So there's actually going to be an expansion over existing conditions. It will be wider on our side to give our residents and guests more room to maneuver. Even without that, we're still fine because obviously people have been maneuvering on site without issue, but we're talking about this area here. Yeah, so we have 27 feet behind our spaces and they're able to appropriately circulate without concern.
Yep, go ahead.
Mr. Miller, are we going to be able to look at the turning spaces on that computer?
Yeah, no, I can't bring it up, I'm afraid.
Board Member Hirsch, they're in the PowerPoint slides. I put them all in the PowerPoint, if that is what you're looking at.
Right, but I wanted to question the engineer with the PowerPoint rather than just with the 8.5 by 11 paper.
Understood.
Mr. Hirsch, I think it's fine if you want to go up and look at the full-scale size there, it might help you. If not, I'm just giving it as a suggestion.
Now, the issue is not just looking at it, but it's looking at it and asking questions of the engineer while looking at it on the screen. Let me just do it this way then. Mr. Ullman, am I saying your name right, Mr. Ullman? In order for an individual to back into space one, would this individual have to encroach on the property at 21 Cherry Street?
No. If you look at it, it's within our joint area, and he pulls up into, I have him pulling up into this area right here. But into our right here, well, the pavement behind our parking area is what he's using.
So,
And what size vehicle are we talking?
It's a passenger vehicle.
So your modeling only takes into consideration passenger vehicles?
Oh, excuse me?
Your modeling, whatever work you did assumes that somebody will be driving a passenger vehicle.
Passenger vehicle.
What is the maximum size of a vehicle that could utilize this?
This vehicle is 19 feet bumper to bumper with 11-foot wheelbase.
So it's 19 feet long and 6 feet wide. The standard vehicle is about 6 feet wide.
7 feet wide.
All right, so, okay, you give me an extra foot. All right, thank you.
It's in, if you look at my sheets that was submitted to the board, all the specifics of the vehicle are on those sheets.
My concern is so the modeling you used was a vehicle that's 19 feet long and 7 feet wide. What is the maximum size of a vehicle that could use this parking device?
For the auto lift,
Yeah, for the auto lift.
that will have to be a question for the gentleman who knows auto lift.
You did not include that in your modeling?
I used this vehicle, which will definitely fit on the auto lift.
Yeah, but I want to talk about the maximum vehicle. The maximum size vehicle, would that maximum size vehicle encroach upon 21 Cherry Street when they're backing in?
We did this for a passenger vehicle. What the maximum size vehicle is going to be, I couldn't tell you.
All right, then I want to talk to him.
so board member, just to understand what your concern is it the size of the vehicle that can use the lift or the access into the site? Because I think we're talking about two different things here.
I'm asking, the first question is, what is the maximum size vehicle that can utilize this lift?
Okay.
So we can find that out right now, yeah.
Yes.
Just answer the question.
Good evening, my name is Levin Vestergaard, address 45 Benner Drive in Milford, Connecticut. That's where my business is stationed out of. So the auto stacker's maximum capacity, as stated, is 6,000 pounds, which typically covers everything up to mid-sized SUVs. So any passenger vehicle that would be able to pull in and out of a parking space in general.
All right, answer the question again. What is the maximum size vehicle that would be able to...
6,000 pounds.
That's pounds. I'm talking about length and width. Maximum length...
Length and width is irrelevant because all wheelbases on vehicles are different. So I have photos in my phone of an album for auto stackers specifically for this evening of G-Wagons, Ferraris, Corollas, Tahoes. The lift is designed to handle any vehicle that weighs up to 6,000 pounds, which covers a wide array of widths and lengths on vehicles.
How about a Cadillac Escalade?
What's that?
How about a Cadillac Escalade?
Yeah?
All right, so a Cadillac Escalade, Mr. Ullman, could a Cadillac Escalade try to park into, back into space one, when that person is backing into space one, would that vehicle, in order to do so, encroach upon 21 Cherry Street?
It will use all the pavement, whether or not that encroaches on 21 is with the whole, leave that to the attorney.
No, that's you.
That vehicle may need to make more than a single maneuver to do it. I don't have a specific Escalade vehicle in there. We design around passenger vehicles. But as I said, if I did these with a single move, pull up and back in a single smooth move.
Right, but
If someone is driving something larger or more difficult, they may have to jockey.
Excuse me, what was that word?
They may have to jockey back and forth to to park.
I'm not asking about jotting. I'm asking whether that person driving a Cadillac Escalade, the largest vehicle that could fit in this auto contraption, in order to do a maneuver to back into this space, would that vehicle Escalade encroach upon 21 Cherry Street?
Board Member Hirsch, just a couple of things. I just looked it up for what it's worth, and according to the Cadillac website, the most recent Cadillac Escalade is less than 18 feet long, which is going to be actually shorter than the 19-foot that we have here. So this actually applies to a Cadillac Escalade. So I think, and this shows that we don't have to encroach beyond the Pentway in order to access our site.
Thank you. That's all I was asking.
We understand we were not trying to be obstructive. We were just trying to understand the tenor of the question and answer it appropriately.
The tenor of the question is there were certain assumptions made by the expert. What I'm getting at is that he, as I understand it, the expert was using an exemplar vehicle most favorable to you and your applicant. I wanted to use the maximum size vehicle so we can ensure that whoever is going to be utilizing this property will not be encroaching upon the neighbor.
Understood, and for the record, we typically try to take the most conservative approach, hence the 19-foot, or the industry standard. 19 feet is actually longer than your standard Cadillac Escalade. So we are obviously incorporating the longer vehicles as well here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further questions at this point? Yes, Mr. Sadi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you, probably to...
Everyone?
No, 2 of the 3 at the best. I have the questions concerning, first about garbage pickup and disposal.
Yes.
We have a first picture that you gave us on the PowerPoint presentation shows us a very narrow, which I think is 15 feet. What happens if it's garbage collection day and they have to park the truck and it blocks the ability of anybody to get in or out of there? How do we handle that problem? If you've thought of it, I'm sure you have. If you have, give us an answer. If not, let us know.
Absolutely. Board member, it would be like any other day at any other development with garbage collection. It would be a temporary disruption once a week as they're removing. It wouldn't be more than a few minutes. So that right there, we don't believe that that's a concern. That's just a temporary disruption that is a part of any development of this configuration.
And I appreciate the answer. Your garbage corral seems to indicate there's going to be 8 units, therefore there's going to be 8 separate.
Correct, that's what we have depicted.
But would there not be 16 if we have recycling and garbage, or it's going to be just 1?
8 trash bins, 2 recycling bins. I was just able to lean in and see that print.
I appreciate that. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I appreciate the answer. The next question is on snow. We understand that's going to impact both sides of the building. We understand that, but I'm trying to understand, you made a statement that it's going to be carted off-site. And could you just elucidate that a little bit more, please?
Certainly. So to the extent, I believe this is not the landscaping plan, but generally, our snow storage area here, southwest corner of the site, to the extent we have a massive snowstorm and we cannot safely store all of the snow in that snow storage area, then we will cart it off site to ensure that typical operations are not impacted. So we're not blocking cars, we're not blocking the lifts, we're not blocking any doorways or walkways. We will cart that off site. And I'll tell you, for many of my clients that I work with, that's fairly typical. When you don't have a huge swath of land to store excess snow, it just gets carted off site if it can't fit.
Thank you. And the last question on snow removal. What plans are in place to make sure that whoever your snow removal person is doesn't trigger hitting one of the stacking units and then they start collapsing on each other?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Vestergaard to come up here and just, again, and talk about the opportunity for collapse. As I understand it, that's not possible with these lifts. Okay. But in terms of the snow contractor, that's something that the applicant would certainly work out when they hire a private snow contractor. I'm sure there would be a special discussion or provision perhaps in an agreement saying, listen, we have these particular lifts. You're not allowed to use a plow to plow snow up against them or something along those lines. So, of course, it's in the applicant's interest to maintain these lifts and ensure that they're operating properly for the residents. So that will be a discussion with the contractor, but Mr. Vestergaard can opine on the possibility of these collapsing, because as I understand it, it's just not a possibility.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, Lev Investor again. Yeah, so the structure of these lifts, they can't collapse left to right. The design is two independent scissor sections with a platform deck. So based on the plans that I'm looking at too, it would be nearly impossible for a plow to get an angle to hit them broadside. And realistically, there would be vehicles in the way, so whether the vehicles or the lifts, they would be being avoided altogether as well.
And I appreciate that from the side, but can
They're
you just
also
explain-
anchored to the concrete
Yeah.
with anchor bolts. And
So what if they came in from the side, or they came in, somebody was coming into the parking area and they didn't get everything right?
Yeah.
It's not going to collapse?
no, they have multiple safety features in place between locks and the hydraulic pressure that physically lifts them. There would have to be simultaneous things that happened all at once for these things to even creak down. And if they did, they would set into the nearest available lock. So they wouldn't come crashing down straight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. No further questions at this point.
Now that you're up here, I do have a question. Can you give us some examples of lifts that either you personally installed or the company that manufactures the product that they're specifying for this project?
Yeah.
And how long they have withstood snowy New England winters? You know, do we have a 10-year or a 15-year history of them being safe for 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, so this particular company, Benpack, produces the auto stacker. They've been in business for over 50 years. The auto stacker is a standalone product. It's very unique. There are other companies that have tried to mimic it, but Benpack really has it down right. New York parking, obviously everybody knows, is very difficult. These lifts are designed and utilized to save space, so they are in parking garages all across the country. I have seen applications of them inside and outside, obviously more so inside, but the outside applications, the gauge of steel that's used on these lifts is very heavy. Each unit weighs about 2,800 pounds individually. In addition to that, each unit is powder coated on every part, and then, as mentioned before, the deck is galvanized, which is designed to be rust-proof, essentially.
Right, so the galvanization is just the deck, not on the other parts. They're powder coated. And just for everyone to hear, when I called the company and asked them for some data on units that have existed in, say, in New England, multiple winters in a row, they had no address, no potential actually site that they could tell us that, yes, we have this that has been outside. I mean, if you look at the website, 95% of the photos are inside use, right? So there are a couple photos of outside, but not in the snow, and not something that we know that 10 years from now we're not going to be in a situation where this board permitted something that now 10 years from now could potentially be dangerous. That's the concern.
So I've personally put in lifts inside and outside applications. Although uncommon, these lifts are designed to be interior and exterior use. As far as in this local area of Connecticut, there may have been a couple lifts I've put outside, but when we talk about a company as big as Benpack, their bandwidth across the nation, there are definitely examples that I've seen. I know the people at Benpack very well. In parking structures like this particular lift is the favored design because of its discrete platform, and none of the other lifts that they produce have the extra measures such as galvanization on the decking, because those other lifts aren't technically favored in exterior positions. This one is.
Right, okay. But just to be clear, the question I asked was, where in New England do we have an example of something that has existed through multiple snowy winters? The answer is you don't know. And the answer is that the corporate company, when I asked that question of them, when I called them, did not know either. So that's all I'm saying. I'm making a statement. You don't have to respond.
Oh, okay. I mean, I could certainly get you in touch with someone at Benpack who could provide.
I have spoken with them, but...
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to put Mr. Vestergaard's experience into the record, just to give the board some comfort with the fact that he knows what he's talking about.
I'm sure they're good lifts, but I'm just specifically asking about something that exists
Understood.
through many New England winters, and there is no data that he has been able to give, nor is there data from the company. That's all I'm saying.
Understood, Mr. Chair, and I'm not disputing your right to ask those questions. I'm just asking for the record and for the board's edification for Mr. Vestergaard to kind of give a little bit of background, his experience with AutoStacker, and also one of the things I wanted to focus on, and Levin, I'll have you touch on this. The chairman said, how do we know these are going to be safe in 10 years? And again, I think that goes to maintenance and the fact that even if there is some type of concern with the actual AutoStacker lift, some part fails, it still doesn't become a safety issue because it will lock in place. So I believe the board's concern is that it's going to deteriorate in the snow and one day these lifts are just going to come crashing down. And the way these units have been designed, again, as the non-expert in the room, but Levin can confirm this, the way they've been designed is if there is some type of failure, there are multiple safety measures to ensure that they would lock down at the next position. They're never going to come crashing down. So I'm going to ask Levin to just put his experience in, his experience with AutoStackers, where he's installed them, and again, he's a local Milford company owner. So.
Understood. Yeah, that's all fine. Thank you.
So as far as the maintenance goes, for every lift I install, I offer scheduling of an annual maintenance to these products. Just like with a car that sits outside all winter, preventative maintenance is what's going to really speak to the longevity of these products. In addition to that, these products are very simple and they're built very well. So anything after an inspection that would happen either annual or even biannual, if there's extra concerns of them sitting out in the elements, would be noticed by myself or one of my experienced technicians and addressed at that point.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can you put a little bit about your background, the lift guys, how long you've been working with AutoStacker?
My father started this business 42 years ago. I took over from him 6 years ago, but I've been doing this for about 16 years. When AutoStacker first came out, we were the first installers of the AutoStackers in the Northeast and East Coast. I've probably put in over 100, if not more. I've put in 3 this week, and I have 3 more going in after today. Yeah, the AutoStackers, like I said, it's a very popular brand of lift. The company that makes them has been producing lifts for over 50 years. They're very well built, and what is also notable with this particular product is the array of people I put them in for. People upwards of 85 years old, driving their own cars on there and using them, all the way down to young people my age, around the age of 30. So these are very user-friendly. Everything you need to do can be done at the control station. And on the control station, there are 3 safeties. There's an emergency shutoff, a key. All the controls are press and hold. And in the event that there is malfunction in the electronics, there are 3 safeties that you can shut off so that nothing can happen. In addition to that, there's illustrations right on the head unit that shows operational procedure. And after every install, I go through thorough training with my customers, and I leave my personal phone number so that if anyone ever has any issues, they can call me. I also offer FaceTime as a service, and I've troubleshot a few things that more often than not are just operator error. So it would be just like operating the vehicles that are parking on top of it with proper training and just common sense, which I believe most people have. This equipment can be used very well.
Thank you. Any questions? Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, the example of operator error, I think, is really important because while it's true that, for example, a vehicle can be used safely if you don't make any mistakes, people do make mistakes. People die in vehicles all the time. And I think, for me, the concern is less about them just collapsing. It sounds as though that's not really possible. but more all the ways that they could be misused if someone forgot their EpiPen in the top of the car lift and needs to access it suddenly. There are all kinds of scenarios when someone might be using something like this unsafely, or multiple people are trying to access their car at the same time. And I can't speak for the police commission, but I suspect that some of those possibilities were what prompted them to ask for more information. And I feel like that might be compounded by the fact that these will be outside in an area with lots of foot traffic, no kind of enclosure to prevent any member of the public or child from going and trying to climb up the auto stacker. I guess that's my main safety concern, and I wonder if you can address that at all, or?
Well, as far as someone leaving something in the vehicle that's stored up, as mentioned, they have a under 60-second rise and fall time when they're operated. When they're sitting in their position, they're sitting in a locked and resting position. They're stationary. They're very heavy, durable equipment, and they're anchored to the ground. So if someone's child decided to climb on it, it would be a very sturdy structure. It certainly wouldn't compromise any integrity. You could shake it, you could probably run into it with a car and it wouldn't even move. Other than that, I mean, is there any other specific questions on the safety of the structure?
No, I think you understand what I was saying.
Yeah.
Board member, if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not dismissing your concerns, certainly, but I would just remind the board that there are risks with operator error in anything. A garage door, a child hanging on a garage door and trying to pull the garage door, it could come down. A window not locked properly, someone could fall out. Just because there's a potential concern doesn't mean that it's unsafe. And just the way that our courts have interpreted safety when it comes to 830G applications is you can't be speculative. You could have what ifs in every scenario, and you could make a cotton ball unsafe if you think about it hard enough. You have to look at the way these machinery, anything is intended to be used. And what we're doing is we're attempting to provide, again, the board with enough information to understand that the lift itself is extraordinarily safe for all the reasons Levin explained, but also we're going to be providing the training, the manual, the property manager on call, the installation lift technician on call. Also, one thing we didn't mention was that each individual unit is going to have its own control center. So you can operate them separately, or if one control unit fails and the lift is locked for whatever reason, and you're waiting for Levin to come and save the day, someone else can still access their car. So we have put so many safeguards here to ensure that these are used properly that we're very confident. Again, the owner has an interest, of course, in ensuring that these are safe, that these are absolutely safe to use.
To add to that, I would say that, especially with electric vehicles becoming a new thing with control stations and charging stations, they offer a dynamic where it's a new concept, but with training, it's very easily used because those electrical outlets have, high voltage, which could be risky, but we see people using them effectively daily.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Glennon, is it?
Levin.
Clement, thank you for coming. Just a couple of questions. The power unit itself, the master power unit, is that enclosed?
Yes.
In a typical operation?
Correct.
Okay. You said you've been in business, you and your father, for 40 years?
He's doing it for 42 years. I took over the business from him. I worked under him for about 16 years, and I bought the business from him about 6 years ago.
And I'm sure you guys are really skilled, and I'm sure the product sounds great. I'd love to have one myself. But this is public safety, so don't mistake our questions for something else. We just have to make sure this is safe. And if I'm not mistaken, one of the ways 830 and 830G application can be, it's subject to safety as a consideration. So that's why we're focusing in on this. So how many units have you installed? Outside units.
Outside units?
Yeah.
About a dozen, I would say.
dozen in
Over the course of the 16 years working with my father,
New England entirely?
we cover the whole Northeast. In New England, a handful. We install so many lifts per week, it's hard to remember
Sure,
specific
sure.
instances.
Just, but in general, okay.
Yeah.
And these units, they come down and they go forward, correct? You're up here? and-
No, so these lifts, it's a scissor style. So a cylinder pushes up and they extend and retract. So they go directly
just up
up
and
and
down.
directly down. There's no lateral movement
So
at
the
all.
car underneath has to be gone?
Correct, yeah. You pull the bottom car underneath and you lower the
Okay.
vehicle.
So I would have to assume there's some sort of proximity switch or something that'll tell if there's somebody is underneath there when you're bringing the car down. If a dog happened to, cross the path, it'll stop because it sees it, correct?
There's no proximity switch or external switch that would stop the unit, but like I said, everything on the unit is press and hold, and even in the state of a malfunction, it would lower to the next available lock. So if some object were seen that didn't want to be, under the lift, you would simply remove your hand from the button, the vehicle would stop moving. And it's controlled by a valve body, and there are strict guidelines that auto lift makers have to abide by, where they cannot fall a certain speed. They're highly restrictive, and these lifts don't go. They're no speed demons. They go down pretty slow.
Okay, understood. And I think that's it. And you're also of the opinion that enclosing these would prove to be more of a hazard than if they were just out in the open?
Six of one, half dozen the other, in my opinion. Them being exposed or enclosed, the application for these lifts is both. So it really becomes preference.
Okay. And one final thing, I did know, I didn't call the company, but I did go to the website and I did do some searches, and I didn't see anything. The website, for instance, mentions sleet and rain, but doesn't mention snow. So I found that unusual, if that's a product that is...
The company's based out of California. I'm not sure if that comes into play with their wording, the one thing that I wanted to say earlier to keep in mind is calling the company, even myself calling the company, you have to pass through a few layers of red tape until you get to someone who's actually experienced, because the first people you call are people that just do sales orders, and they usually direct you to someone who's more knowledgeable. Jeff Kritzer is the owner of BenPack. I've spoken to him on this subject previously on other projects, and then Dave Shedlock is the president of National Accounts. I've spoken to him on this subject regarding this, and those would be the people to talk to, because if you talk to just the first sales rep, they wouldn't provide an accurate depiction of the product as much as these gentlemen would.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Any further questions at this time? I guess you can continue on if you have more to present, or...
Mr. Chairman, I do have some closing comments, but for what it's worth, if there's any member of the public, they've been waiting a little while, if they have... Oh, and I see Board Member Hirsch has some questions.
I have a legal question for her, but we can do that after the...
Either way.
We'll do it after the public speaks. They've been waiting
Okay.
long enough.
Yep, so I'll just close after, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yes, so this is a public hearing, and the public is invited to speak if they wish. If you would like to come speak to this issue, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the board, and keep your comments to about 3 minutes, I guess. We don't have anybody? Okay, so the public questioning is closed out.
All right, so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn to, through you, Board Member Hirsch, if he has a question.
Sure, that's fine.
Before I conclude.
Attorney Gomes, hi.
Hi.
I have a legal question for you. As a board, if we believe that an individual, a tenant of this property, is going to engage in turning maneuvers in such a fashion that it will involve encroachment on the premises of 21 Cherry Street, if we believe that is the case, how can we Let me do it again. If we believe as a board that a tenant of 1719 Cherry Street is going to use the driveway, the shared driveway, in a manner such that in order to engage in this turning maneuver back into the space, this individual, this tenant, will have to encroach upon 21 Cherry Street. Notwithstanding the fact that you're bringing this application under 830G, how can we grant this request under 830G if we believe, in fact, that this will involve the infringement on another property?
A couple of comments through you, Mr. Chairman, Board Member Hirsch. So first off, this is an 830G, so the board's looking exclusively at public health and safety, and I'll touch back on that. So the phrase that you used, Board Member, notwithstanding 830G, it has to be an 830G because that is the lens through which this board needs to evaluate the application. That being said, two additional comments. The evidence that the board has before it, we have turning movements done by industry standard software and a very experienced traffic engineer showing that there will not be an encroachment. So there really is no indication in the record that there would be, particularly as we discussed earlier at length, even with longer cars like a Cadillac Escalade. But putting aside those two facts, the board is not a court. I'm saying the obvious, and that's because the board cannot litigate or opine on or decide private property rights. And whether or not we encroach, that is a private property issue. So the evidence that the board has before it is that we will not encroach to the extent that the
I'm not talking about we. I'm talking about a tenant.
No, I say we as the applicant and the tenants.
I'm talking about the tenant. If we believe that a tenant is going to be encroaching, if we reasonably believe that a tenant is going to be encroaching on 21 Cherry Street to do this backing maneuver, yes, you are here under an 830G, but how can we grant an application under 830G if we believe that the use of this property will involve encroachment on an adjacent property?
And board member, I go back to, A, it's not a public health and safety issue, and B, this board is not allowed to opine on private property matters. Whether or not there's an encroachment, that is a private property matter that would be left to a reviewing court. But all of the evidence that the board has before it is there would be no encroachment here. It would be completely speculative to assert that there'd be an encroachment when the turning movements we've submitted show there won't be.
Well, those are the turning movements that was done by your engineer, but I can, if I had this, if the expensive TV here was working, I could show you a maneuver that a reasonable tenant could use to go onto the property and back straight in to this property, to this lift, I should say.
And we're beating a dead horse here a little bit, so I'll just, again, reiterate, 830G standard is public health and safety, and this court cannot opine on private property matters. To the extent that is a concern with the neighbor, that's a private property matter that would be taken amongst the parties, not before this board.
So what you're saying is you're utilizing, in essence, 830G as a sword in which to allow one property owner to exercise dominion and control over the enjoyment of another person's property.
That is, with all due respect, board member, that is absolutely not what I said. The standard for 830G is set by the legislature as interpreted by our courts, and it is public health and safety. Again, I'll touch on that in my closing comments. And all I'm saying is the board has no basis to believe that there will be an encroachment here because, again, as we've provided in the record, we have an absolute right to use the entirety of that pentway and the 27 feet, which includes in front of our parking spaces. There's no basis for the board to conclude that there's an encroachment here. But even if there were, or there were a concern that there'd be an encroachment, that's a private property matter that the board cannot judge.
Any further questions? Mr. Sadi.
Thank you, counsel. And just more comment. You can see from where you're located most likely, but we're going to be on MGAT. The board members, myself, and to the right, we're using our devices, looking up your plans and your documents. We have also on paper, but I just want to comment on that. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further questions or comments from the board? Yep. Without objection, we will close the public hearing.
Oh, can I make my closing comments, if I may, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
Thank you. Yes, I'll make my closing comments, and then, of course, if the commission or board has any other questions. So, I am going to begin my closing comments really where we started and as I forecasted for Board Member Hirsch, which is the 830G standard. So the standard is very clear. The Commission cannot deny the application unless there's a public health and safety issue that outweighs the need for affordable housing and which cannot be addressed by reasonable changes to the plan. Those prongs are important to the Commission's review. Importantly, public health and safety needs to be documented and it needs to be a quantifiable concern. What ifs and speculation are not enough, and the court has been very, very clear on this. You've heard from our team of experts that the proposed community is safe, and staff comments to date have not indicated any safety concern. There has been a request for more information, but there hasn't been any issue with safety. We have our sewer approval. The fire marshal approved the plan with conditions acceptable to the applicant, and Mr. Sulkis did not indicate any safety concerns in his memo. Mr. Miller has issued 2 memos, essentially advising the Commission to request more information of the applicant that it felt as appropriate on parking and snow storage and so on, which we've provided. Even the Police Commission expressed, again, a want for additional information, clarification on the number of units and the number of parking spaces, and additional information on the auto stackers, but there wasn't an explicit safety concern. There was simply no indication that the plan as proposed is unsafe. Instead, the focus on the hearing and much of what we've talked about tonight and back in July has been on parking. Not only the number of spots, whether there are enough, but the proposed use of the auto stacker lifts, which again provide additional parking in an efficient and environmentally friendly way. Putting aside that the fact that the number of parking spaces alone generally is not a safety concern, Board has heard repeatedly how we met the state standard for parking, how the site is located near the train station, near public transit, there's a bike rack, all signs that point to a resident pool that will use alternative transportation in lieu of a car. But even if that's not the case, we have street parking as confirmed by Sergeant Kraniak, which is helpful here. Regarding the auto stackers themselves, again, I'm not going to rehash everything we've discussed tonight, but we've heard a lot about what they look like, how they work, and more importantly from Mr. Vestergaard, an installation technician with years of experience. Again, you heard he's installed over 100, if not closer to 2 of these over the last 6 years. These are the safest lifts on the market, and there are a number of safety mechanisms here to ensure that there is no issue with safety. We understand that the lifts are new to the Board, and as with any new piece of equipment or technology, EV charging stations being one example, there is a learning curve, and the Board asked the right questions here to ensure that this is safe. And we believe we've provided all the information for the Board to reasonably conclude that these are safe. So, in sum, this development plan, this community checks a lot of boxes. You have an attractively designed building that will provide additional, much-needed housing, but with only a modest increase in density, and you have it near public transportation opportunities. To boot, the building itself is safe, it's code compliant, and it's energy efficient. I'd also be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to remind the Board that this plan helps the city meet several of its goals in its May 2022 830J Affordable Housing Plan, including addressing housing gaps by focusing on areas of affordable rental housing and ensuring an availability of a mix of housing types at a variety of price points, The plan also suggests small-scale infill development near the train station, noting that it is a walkable downtown environment with close proximity to retail, town services, educational facilities, open spaces, and so on. And we check those boxes too. So with that, I will thank the Commission and urge that it approve our plan. And we thank, again, town staff as well for all of their assistance throughout this process.
Well, thank you for that. And I do concur and agree that we do need affordable housing and that this Board has been a great supporter of affordable housing in general. It's a beautiful building. I feel that there's a potential safety issue with having the lifts outside. Personally, I think that there's potential, whether it's kids or vandalism or access that would be better. It would be better for me personally if it was inside the building. I also think that a reasonable accommodation to get the parking that you say that you're developer would desire, you know, the right to have it parked properly would be to just lift the building up a little bit and have parking underneath, as so many buildings downtown and around the city have. And so I think that there are ways to accommodate a safety concern, reasonable ways to get this nicely designed and well-needed project to move forward. But we do not have to vote on this tonight. We can, if somebody wants to make a motion, we can think it through and review all the information that we've been given over the last few sessions and have a motion at our next meeting, if that's something that we would like to do. A couple of questions. Yep.
Mr. Chair, given that we do not have to act on this at this time, and given that the Police Commission will be meeting sometime in September, might I suggest that we wait until the Police Commission meets and presents any comments on this until we act?
Okay, so I think that the public hearing is closed, but the staff can get information from the Police Commission and disseminate that to the board. Is that accurate in your mind, Brian?
Yes, but I would just suggest that when you close the public hearing, that you put that on the record, that the police commission comments will be accepted. I believe it is, but perhaps Madam Attorney has a comment before you close the hearing.
So I apologize, I was discussing with one of our team members your comments, Mr. Chairman. So the request is to have the police commission comments submitted into the record after the public hearing is closed. If that's the case, I'd rather keep it open so that we have the opportunity to respond. Again, our position is that the board doesn't need police commission comments because it's an advisory opinion only, and all they asked for was additional information. But if the board is pushing to have those comments submitted into the record for its decision, we need the opportunity to be able to respond.
I think that's reasonable. Does that address your thoughts too, Mr. Hirsch?
Can you do that one more time?
So, not verbatim, unfortunately.
I'm trying to multitask here.
Yes, no, I understand. So the discussion was about closing the public hearing and then receiving police commission comments into the record after the public hearing had closed. The concern from the applicant, of course, is that those comments would be submitted into the record and we would not have the opportunity to respond or provide additional information to answer a question that would come up.
Would that be, could that be just on a document from the commission and a document from, that you have an opportunity to respond to and a document back to the commission, or does it need to be in this open type of situation?
I mean, ideally, it would be the police commission. I mean, in an ideal world, the police commission will say, we have no problem with the auto stackers, and then we'll come and hand everyone a stamped copy. But
no, I think I agree. I think we would get the report, we would have it, and then you would have your opportunity to see it in advance and be able to address it in this forum.
Yes, the hope would be to address only the new issues that would come up. If any, it could be hopefully as simple as my standing up and saying the police commission has no concerns. We've worked this out with Sergeant Kraniak.
Okay, so is that sufficient for the board? So without objection, we will keep the public hearing open for whatever the police commission has to address, if anything, and then the applicant will have due opportunity to respond.
And for the record, you put down, you are consenting to the extension of the public hearing solely for the purpose of getting input from the police commission and response from the applicant.
Up to and through the next regular meeting of the commission, of the board, excuse me. I don't have that exact date. September 3rd, I'm hearing from Ms. LaFawn. So yes, up to and through September 3rd, we consent to an extension, and I will submit that in writing to Mr. Miller and Ms. LaFawn tomorrow.
Thank you. Without objection.
So Chairman, does that mean that if another safety concern surfaces that we become aware of, we would not be able to pursue that?
It would have to come through the police commission. If they bring it up, then it's under, it would be it would be open season.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Okay.
we have the public hearing open. The public hearing is open. There's nothing legally preventing the board from asking an additional question of us or of us submitting additional information into the record. So, to the extent, Board Member Mortimer, you have a question, what I'd suggest, because we really need to close this on September 3rd, what I'd suggest is that you submit that question or that concern to staff. Staff can then, and this goes for any board member, staff can then pass that on to the applicant, and we will come prepared with answers to the extent we can at the next meeting.
That sounds reasonable.
That's good. Yep. Okay. Okay, without objection, that's the way it's
Okay,
going to go forward. Thank you.
thank you all.
Next order of business is proposed regulation amendment 24-5 petition of Mayor Anthony Giantassio for a change to Milford zoning regulations, Article 5, Section 521, smoke shops, vape shops, tobacco shops, Article 11, definitions to provide regulations concerning smoke, tobacco, and vape shops within the city of Milford. If you are leaving the building, please do so quietly so that the next order of business can proceed. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be back before you. This proposed regulation change, first, I would like to offer an amendment to my proposed regulation to include the definitions of cannabis and tobacco as shown on the handout that was provided by staff. For the record, I just want you to acknowledge that you do have that handout, Mr. Chairman, included. And this regulation, proposed regulation change, practically speaking, the citizens of Milford have reached out and they're concerned. They believe there's a saturation of smoke shops throughout the city limits. And this is what prompted this proposed regulation change from my office. I've spoken to many residents about this subject matter, and some of the spaces, some of the locations, I feel aren't the best use of the property. I've also invited along tonight our health director, Deepa Joseph, so she can share her thoughts on the public health impact that these smoke shops have throughout our city. But so I'm clear, we're not denying access. Any smoke shop that is in business will remain open. They will be grandfathered in. To date, for the record, if you Google on your phone, we have approximately 15 of these smoke shops present in our city. And some of them are relatively close to each other. For an example, we have one on Daniel Street, downtown. We have one on Gulf Street. And we also have these products being sold, for an example, in gas stations, convenience stores, retail stores. So there is access. So we're not denying the consumer access. That's not the purpose of this. We just feel that there's an overabundance and we'd like to cap it. It's not something that creates a positive environment in our city. So I ask for your support, your consideration in moving this forward. At this time, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
My question is, what are we talking about? What's the amendment?
The amendment that's before you?
Yeah, should
Well-
read it? Just read it for us.
Well, the proposed regulation does not prohibit the sale of tobacco, e-cigarettes, and related products and other paraphernalia from these products that may be sold at a retail establishment where less than 20% of the retail area is dedicated to the sale of such products. So basically what I'm asking for with this regulation change is we're capping the amount of smoke shops. We don't want to increase a smoke shop which includes...
So, Mike, the question is, where does it say that, and where does it say that the current owners are grandfathered in?
It should say that in your packet, in the handout. I'll defer to the city planner.
inherently, if whatever is...
Stop. Does it say it or not? Not inherent.
Well, if you please let me finish. It doesn't say it there, but in any other situation, whatever is there now can remain. Now, you could certainly, if you feel the need to, you can add that on. There's no harm to it.
May I make a comment, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please do.
Wouldn't it be easier if we just made it with an effective date of, say, September 1 of 2024? I think what Mr. Collegian's point is that he makes a very good point, which is what are we establishing here? If you want to establish a ban on additional smoke shops, put it in the text effective, say, September 1 of 2024. That way you have an actual start date.
Maybe I could read it to you. Am I reading it right? All smoke shops, tobacco stores and vape shops, as defined in Article 11 of these zoning regulations, are prohibited in all zoning districts in the city of Milford. Somebody say grandfather in there?
The shops that currently exist prior to this adoption of this proposed regulation are grandfathered as pre-existing legal non-conforming uses. It's under zoning regulation section 5.21.
I'm glad you have it because we don't.
Where is that?
That's the proposed. That's the proposal that's before you.
And, I'm just going to move on because we don't have an answer for that yet, and it doesn't look like we're going to get it. The second thing I have is you said that these are too close to each other, and
that's an observance.
All right, so liquor stores have a distance that they got to be away from each other, correct?
What's before you is smoke
Do
shops.
liquor stores, do you know if liquor stores have to be a certain distance from each other?
Do you know?
Yes, they do. And I'm asking, shouldn't we concentrate on a distance requirement rather than just blanketly say no more?
Well, there's also health concerns in regards to this proposed regulation change.
There's health concerns about eating McDonald's too, and we're not talking about that tonight.
Exactly. We're talking about, we're not talking about liquor stores either.
Is there, in the package that we received, not the document we have in front of us, is there a different definition of this proposed regulation? Is this what was circulated? Good, Susan.
If I may, through the chair, the information that was shared with the board via your customary emails where you receive the agenda with the links to the information for each application to be heard showed the amendment in its entirety. That was part of the package that the board would review prior to the meeting tonight.
Mr. Chair?
But this is not, excuse me 1 second, this is not what we have right in front of us right now.
No, what is in front of you right now and what I emailed to the board members earlier today, we received it today, is a supplement and an amend, and something that the mayor would like to add to the original amendment in order to further define some of the terms. It's not the body of the amendment itself, other than the Article 11 definitions portion of terms to describe a few more, such as what cannabis is, what tobacco is.
Right, I understand those things.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we received from Ms. LaFont today, with high importance, I guess up to the minute, proposed regulation change. You didn't send it to me?
If I may again through the board, what you received today and what's in front of you today is only the additional information provided by the city attorney's office and Mayor Genatasio regarding his already presented or proposed amendment that was furnished to the board earlier than today for review. This was something that was asked to be shared with the board as an addition to the original amendment, and the only items on this sheet show that what was being amended is simply to increase the number of definitions to include things like cannabis, tobacco, et al. that are attached.
Right, but I don't see anything here about anything being grandfathered. All I see is a blanket essentially closing of all smoke shops, tobacco stores, or vape shops in the city. Nothing about pre-existing vape shops still legally in operation. Just it says that all smoke shops, tobacco stores, and vape shops as defined in Article 11 of these zoning regulations are prohibited in all zoning districts. That's not saying that all pre-existing vape shops and smoke shops are going to be able to remain in business.
Are you looking at what was submitted last week or just what we have in front of us today?
Well, what we had submitted last week is also what's in front of us today.
Okay, the entirety is, I don't think that's accurate.
I think
let me just finish. I think the information that was circulated to the regional planning group is more robust than just this. This is an amendment and not the full text of what was circulated and what we have in front of us as the proposed regulation change.
So, Mr. Chair, so we don't have the full proposal in front of us?
We do, in an email format that you have received.
We received that earlier.
Yes,
correct?
yes. So that was in the links,
Right.
and in did you do full PDF or just in the links?
Sorry, Chair. It's a full PDF within the links to the...
Right. Okay, but it was not a PDF attachment to the email. It's just in the link to all the material.
Correct.
Okay.
This
Understood.
particular document.
That's the answer. So the answer is that when you click on the link to the data and all the different files, it was in that. And so that is different language than this piece of paper that's in front of us. And again, I don't remember it word for word, so I would have to refer back to it. I do have one question for staff. Is it important for this material that we got today, this amendment or addendum, however you want to call it, be circulated to the regional and to the other stakeholders as was the original proposed regulation change? Should this be added to what was circulated and then recirculated before we address it?
It doesn't have to be, because and some of you may know that for a while I was working with Scribe, actually reviewing situations like this. It's based, Scroggs and the other stakeholders that it's sent to, like other communities, their primary interest would be, for Scrog it would be, is there any intermunicipal impact, potential impacts, or any impacts on Long Island Sound? And the other communities, because I work with many communities, they would take a look at it, and they probably wouldn't read much more than the title saying, you know, that's Milford's business. It doesn't affect us. So I think you can act on it without referring it back. That's not the job of the regional commissions to kind of write regulations for you. They're only supposed to look at 2 items.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Hirsch.
I understand that, Mr. Miller. My issue is when I'm going on the Milford Planning and Zoning website, which people on TV are probably looking at right now thinking, what are we doing here? The language of the final text essentially serves to close every smoke shop, tobacco store, vape shop in this town, which I don't believe is the intent of Mr. Mayor. But I think that's what the text is doing by the very words themselves.
John?
Just to echo what the Assistant City Planner was saying earlier, were we to take action on this and pass this regulation, anything that is currently legally operating would be automatically grandfathered in as a pre-existing non-conforming use. That is not something that has to be spelled out specifically.
John, do you have something? Your mic is on.
Not for nothing, but I'm looking at the word all in this regulation text, 5.2.1. It says the word all.
Yes,
A-L-L.
we can't shut down actively operating tobacco stores by fiat like that. They would become legally non-conforming uses at that point.
Why not just make it simple and put it right in the language? Why leave it up to our prior interpretation of legal non-conforming uses? Why not just put that right in the text? Make it simple. All smoke shops, tobacco stores, as defined, are prohibited in all zoning districts in Milford. Or just say, no new smoke shops shall be maintained after September 1 of 2024. Why engage in this legal mumbo jumbo about legal non-conforming use? Just put it right in the text.
And many communities in particular situations, they prefer, even if it's from an optical perspective, to emphasize. I mean, there is redundancy, but that's not necessarily a harmful thing. And I think that your staff, the legal staff, I can't see where specifically emphasizing that all the existing ones can continue to exist as a non-conforming use. I don't think it does anything to you. In fact, it probably will be something when you start getting some angry calls later that you could say it specifically says it doesn't affect existing smoke shops.
Thank you for that. Mr. Sadie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am the representative to the Regional Council of Governments, and I was a participant. It's going to be part of my liaison report, but I'll save it. They did find that it did not have intermunicipal effect, nor did it affect Long Island Sound. I abstained from any vote on it. That being said, I don't think that I don't agree with Mr. Miller's assessment that they just kind of don't look at it. They spent time looking at it. And that was the final result that was done. I'm making no position on whether the additions for today, the definitions of marijuana and cannabis and tobacco would need to go back to regional. With that being said, I do have one question through Mr. Chair to probably Mr. Miller. It appears that this text amendment is for a portion of the statute of our regulations. It's not in effect at all. So they're not adding to, they're not changing, but they're just creating a brand new text amendment, it appears to be. Does the issue of quote, grandfather make any difference to whether it's a brand new regulation or not, if you know?
From the date of approval or the date that is to be put into the make it effective, anything that's, if something was started, if you say September 1st and something was started on August 30th, then it can stay. If there was permits taken out for it, whatever was before that particular date could stay forever. It can't be, it's subject to non-conforming requirements in section 6.3, I think. But it is specific on that. That's for anything, because you do have, any community has lots of non-conforming uses, some that have stayed for decades.
Well, one thing I'd just like to say is that if Mr. Collegian felt that it was important to have the grandfather clause be identified for existing locations, for existing businesses, that could obviously be part of a motion.
Yeah, it won't, I don't think it makes any...
I'm not saying that it either does or doesn't. I'm saying that it can be part of a motion to approve with a language change. If somebody felt that was important, and if the board supported it, then that would be the language change.
Sure.
And one second, Mr. Hirsch, you had a question.
Mr. Mayor, this regulation, you have more information than we do, of course, as to the policy behind this, but is the reason for this regulation change due to information you may be receiving from the police department?
No, it's not. This is more from the concerns of the citizens. It's been brought to my attention that there's someone looking to open up a second smoke shop on the other side of the green. I'm just trying to be proactive. You know, like I said, the people feel there's a saturation. Any existing smoke shop will be grandfathered in. That location will carry on the use. So if the smoke shop was to be sold to another proprietor at that location, it would be grandfathered in.
We do have our health director here. I'm okay with listening to whatever she has to say, and then we can continue with other questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. So, as you all know, the health department...
I'm sorry, just name and address for the board, for the record, which is something we always have to do.
Deepa Joseph, 1008 West River Street, Milford. So, as you all know, the Milford Health Department, our mission is really to protect and promote the health of all of our residents in Milford. Specific to this regulation, really the concern is around tobacco use, and particularly with youth in our community. So we know from the data that we have nationally and even locally that we are seeing a number of our youth, over 2 million in the United States, and we're seeing an increase in our Milford youth who are particularly utilizing electronic cigarettes or vapes, basically electronic nicotine delivery systems. So just as a data point for all of you, in 2022, the Milford Prevention Council did a survey with youth in Milford in our high schools. And what they found, this is a survey that's been done since 2009, and what they found is that between 2017 and 2022, most of our youth, we see decreases in use across most substances, that being alcohol, etc. But the only substance where we see an increase in use is nicotine vaping. And as part of that survey, one of the things that our youth were asked was, where do you typically get your substances? Approximately a quarter of the respondents said in stores. And so the importance from a public health aspect of this regulation is really to be able to address that underage youth access. And to Board Member Hirsch's question around the police department, while this is not police department data necessarily, the Connecticut Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services typically does compliance checks around the state. And when they are in Milford, they will call on the Milford Police Department to assist with some of those compliance checks. So as just another data point for Milford, they did a compliance check in December 2023, and there were 4 infractions issued to 4 shops in Milford for selling to underage youth in the community. So really from a public health standpoint, again, we're supportive of this regulation, again, as it really speaks to the need to address underage access to tobacco and nicotine products, which we know that tobacco use is the single most preventable cause of death and disease in this country. And so we really support this regulation change. And I'm happy to take any questions as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Yep.
Is your department, the health department, what is the leading cause of death of Americans today in America?
So, leading preventable cause of death is tobacco use.
It's not cardiovascular disease?
Well, tobacco use that contributes to to various diseases, including cardiovascular disease.
Does fast food contribute to cardiovascular disease?
Yes, it does.
Is your department undertaking any measures to restrict or limit the number of fast food restaurants in the city of Milford?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of our health director? Mr. Collegian? No? Thank you. It's a public hearing. Anyone want to come up and speak? I don't think there's anyone left in the room. I'm sorry, you had a question.
Does this proposed amendment or this proposal cover gas stations?
What's before you tonight?
Do you think the gas stations come within any of your definitions of a smoke shop, tobacco store, or vape shop?
So moving forward, if a gas station was to open, they're allowed up to 20% they can sell this product. That's why I indicated that we're not denying access.
So my question is, do you think gas stations come under the, are they smoke shops, tobacco shops, or vape shops?
Can you repeat that question, please?
This amendment is going to apply to smoke shops,
And tobacco.
tobacco stores, and vape shops. Which category does a gas station fall into?
A gas station would be less than 20%, so it would not apply.
So if I have 20% or less in my gas station and nobody smokes there, you could have one of these, you could have a 20% smoke shop on every corner. Everywhere there's a gas station, you could have a smoke shop. As long as they don't exceed 20%.
The proposed regulation before you does not prohibit the sale of tobacco, e-cigarettes, and related products and other paraphernalia. These products may be sold at a retail establishment where less than 20% of the retail area is dedicated to the sale of such products. Example, convenience stores, drugstores, grocery stores, etc. Walmart, Rite Aid, CVS. That will not change. We're just looking to prohibit any new 100% tobacco, smoke shop, vape shops from opening because we have 15 of them throughout the city, and the residents believe it's a saturation of the market and it's not the best environment for Milford. So once again, you can buy this anywhere, but these smoke shops are opening in a very increased rate. Since I got elected, there's been 3 new ones that just opened. Daniel Street was the first. There's one on the Post Road and another one down in Devon. And that's within 8 months. So I don't know how many more you feel that we need, but the residents of Milford that I talk to, that call this City Hall, my office, are concerned.
So what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is you believe that you've identified a public health safety issue and that your proposed regulation is meant to address that health and safety issue?
At this time,
Yes.
yes, I do believe that, and the smoke shops that are in business are also in favor of this because they feel there's too many.
Thank you.
Or perhaps they feel like capitalism isn't something they want to embrace. The reason why these stores open is because there's a need for these stores. If there was no need for the stores, they wouldn't open. So there's apparently a need somewhere, not the folks that are calling your office, but somebody needs them because they're opening. It seems like you said earlier that you're targeting a specific thing. If anything, you're targeting a specific business model. You leave the gas stations alone, they're fine, even though there's one on every corner. It's incongruous. What you're trying to say is it doesn't make any sense.
Mr. Collegian, There's a potential of another smoke shop opening in downtown Milford. I'm protecting the historic charm of the city, and at the same time, I have the health director here talking to you about the public health benefit aspect. Your vote is your vote. You can own it.
No, I appreciate all that, and I've heard, the number of 25% of the products are in retail. Anecdotally, I know people that do buy these products, and they say that most of what they do is they do it on the internet. So I think what we have is a number of things that I think weigh into my decision on how I'm going to put my one vote. One is that it's really available, like you said, in so many other places. Really, this is about optics, about driving down through Daniel Street or down in Devon Center or down in Woodmont, and you see a sign with big, vape shop, come in, smoke, smoke, smoke. So it's, for me, I think that we're addressing the optics of it in a way that's much more significant than doing anything at all about limiting the number of people who are smoking a vape pen. I don't think we're impacting that number of inhales in the city of Milford at all. People will get it either in these 15 stores or through the 62 gas stations or wherever else these products are sold. And going forward, they will as well in locations that have less than 20% of their floor area dedicated to these products. So I don't think we're really addressing a health concern. I don't think we're making inroads there, and I do think it's about the optics, which I get, and I love Milford, and I love, the charm of Milford. My concern is that the soup du jour, so to speak, is tobacco vape shops. What if there's a public outcry against something else? An absurd example would be stuffed animals, right? It's absurd, but if there was stuffed animal stores everywhere and somehow the citizenry got upset about it, then there could be another regulation change against stuffed animal shops. So for me, it is overstepping really what we are trying to do here in terms of land use. I think we're making some judgments on who and who cannot do business and what specific products that are legal, and that's an aldermanic prerogative to do something about what is permitted and what is not permitted. So anyway, I'm not in favor of this particular language, but I do understand fully that there's a lot of good sentiment behind it, and I do acknowledge that there are people that are unhappy about the particular visibility of the one store in Daniel Street and another one potentially and another one in Devon, for example, my neck of the woods. But anyway, are there other questions or comments?
Thank you. Mr. Chair, as I look at the agenda tonight, this particular matter is a public hearing. We're in the public hearing, but it indicates that it can stay open till October 10th of 24. We'd have to close it by that date, and if we close it by that date, we then vote by November 14th. Does that appear to be accurate?
That is accurate.
So my thinking is that we received information from the mayor. I think it's important to hear. There may be some other information we might need to hear. That's all my own comment, but I'm ready to vote if we have to.
Mr. Hirsch?
Mr. Agnees raised his hand before me, so I think you should go first.
Just piggybacking on what Mr. Sadi said, given that we only have 7 members present out of 10 and that this is a regulation change which would require a majority of the full board, I think it would be fair to the mayor to wait until we had the full board here before acting on this.
I'm fine with that without objection. We'll keep the public hearing open. If there's an objection, I would. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Cush, I believe I will be voting in favor of this health and safety measure. I think that there are, as the mayor indicated, there are 15 smoke shops in this city. And I think the mayor has more information than we do. And I think the concern is with more and more smoke shops opening, at some point we're going to reach a critical mass and that's going to, I believe the thinking is that's going to lead to more and more underage smoking. And so why make it easier for our youth to engage in something that that office has identified as being a health and safety measure for our children?
Thank you. Okay. Good, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a lot of good points were brought up. I mean, I generally support this. I think there are too many smoke shops, but that's an opinion. The free market usually decides what is too many. And I would appreciate redundancy in the language for the current shop owners, you know, even if it is unnecessary. You know, for me, I think that would be a favorable change. And the other thing is that the regulation seems a little loose. When you say, Mr. Mayor, 20% of the area, I believe is the language, is that stock or is that square footage? And you know, exactly how is that computed? There's some wiggle room there. and again, it doesn't address the core problem of vape being available to underage, but so I would like some adjustments to the amendment, but generally in favor.
Thank you for that. And one thought is, you know, as we talk about grandfather is that so that someone wants to sell their store, it's a vape shop now, the next person can have a vape shop. What if that use is abandoned? Does it run with the land? And is that something that we should be thinking about beforehand rather than after the fact? But we have, without objection, a continuation, and we will have it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you both for being here. And if you would like a closing statement, please feel free.
I just would like to make a couple of comments. It would not run with the land. If the use of the building changes after it's a smoke shop, then this regulation would come into play. It only carries on if it remains a smoke shop. But anything that is adopted at this point moving forward, that's what this regulation would address. Anything that's already in business would be grandfathered in. And that's, you know, what I've been advised by the city attorney's office. And I understand your concern about optics, but it's the signage. That's another concern that residents have raised. That's what attracts the youth. They ride their bikes down the Daniel Street. The guy down there sells candy, which he's allowed to do, and the kids are in the store, they're buying candy, and now they get curious, and before you know it, they're vaping. And one thing leads to another. So vaping, you know, it's not healthy, it's not what we want to promote. You know, I think there's a better use for that property. I'm not against businesses, but if you go down to surrounding towns like West Haven and Stratford, and you drive up and down and you see all the vape shops, I don't think that's what Milford represents. I think that Milford's better than that, and I'm just trying to do the right thing here.
Understood, and I thank you.
Thank you.
So this is still open, and it will be on the agenda for next meeting. The next order of business is old business. None tonight. Liaison report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I gave my liaison report already, but just to repeat it, I attended the most recent meeting, and I did deal with our reg change in 24-5. Thank you.
Thank you. Subcommittee report. We do not have one. I would like to hear a motion to approve the minutes of 7/16.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Without objection, minutes are approved. Chair's report. Oh, that's mine. No report. I forgot staff report.
Staff report. We're busy because there's a lot of little things going in, and I'm finally getting accustomed to the system here. But I think that Dave will be back soon anyway. But it's always a pleasure, and we try to tie everything together. And I'll call, you know, the tech department, IT, tomorrow about that.
Well done. Okay, thank you. And so we're adjourned.
I think somebody should get you that password.